line, I am joined by our Patriots beat writer, Doug Kyde, and we have the pleasure of being joined by Bears beat writer for the Chicago Tribune, Dan Wiederer. Dan, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Well, this is now the official 2016 launch of the Nesson Pro Football Podcast. We tried to bring it to you last week before the Patriots played the Saints, but due to a technical snafu, if you will, never hit the airwaves or internet waves. So that was disappointing. But here we are. So moving right along. I will note, I tried to send this message out last time. We are looking to rename the podcast. So if anyone has any cool ideas, we're always up to hear them. But guys, Patriots just practiced their final practice, and it was joint practices with the Bears. Things snippy out there all week.
Yeah, all week until today. Today was actually criminally boring, basically, especially for the last practice of training camp. But they got in their work. But yeah, it was an exciting week to have the Bears here. Not like the Saints. The Saints it was all pretty respectful. This week there was a lot of fights out there, and that's not something that we're used to seeing.
I think it's been interesting. The Bears have been a feisty team all month throughout their own training camp, and I think it's something that John Fox is trying to develop in this team, trying to get them to play with a nastier edge, and that showed in some of the skirmishes that broke out. It was interesting for us to hear from the folks here in New England that that's so rare around here that you don't see those skirmishes, those mini melees breaking out in practices like they did this week. The Bears are promising that they're only going to happen in small doses in practices and they won't happen in the game. We'll see if they can toe that line, but that's part of it. They're trying to become a little bit more of an edgy defense, an edgier team, and with that comes a few little dust-ups here and there.
Yeah, believe it or not, Bill Belichick runs a tight ship, if you will. So
I'm actually curious about what you think of this. I think the idea being thrown about in New England is that the Bears kind of came in to assert their dominance a little bit. The Patriots are such a highly renowned team that maybe the Bears had a little bit of a chip on their shoulder coming in, wanted to stir things up a little bit. Do you think that's the case at all here?
I think there's a little of that. I think that there is as I said, with John Fox trying to take this team to the next level and get them to understand that they can compete with the upper echelon teams in this league, that you have to have a little bit of confidence, you have to have a little bit of swagger, and you can't be intimidated just because there's banners everywhere and just because Tom Brady's in the huddle. And so there is, in my opinion, a fine line, because to see them really during Tuesday's practice doing a lot of chirping, a lot of celebrating after second-string touchdowns. I mean, look, this is the New England Patriots. The Bears have finished in last place the last 2 years. There comes a time and a place for that kind of thing. We'll see where they can take that, but I do think they're trying to develop an identity where they have a little bit more outward confidence than maybe they've had in the past.
Now, with the Patriots being perennial contenders, what specifically do you think the Bears may have been hoping would rub off on their team? As you say, John Fox is trying to take them to the next level.
I think it's just getting a look at the standard and getting a look at how another team does their work on a daily basis. And here you have a chance to go up against a team that always wins divisions and understands how to really be sound and fundamentally efficient in every phase of the game. And to have 3 practices in a game against an organization like that, it gives you an idea where the bar is and where the standards are set and where you should be striving to reach. And as I said, it's been a long stretch here for the Bears of being a very mediocre to bad team, and the belief that they have that they can soon return to relevance comes with benchmarks. And one of those benchmarks is going up against teams like the Patriots and seeing where you measure up, finding your deficiencies, and then working through them.
Well, then having joint practices, again, the Patriots coming off the last week with the Saints and now with the Bears kind of helps them avoid those dog days of the final days of training camp, because when you think about it, I mean, the Bears weren't here. I find it hard to believe we wouldn't maybe see the Patriots just getting into it a little with their own teammates. But aside from just kind of staying out of that rut, Doug, what do you think that the Patriots were able to take away from practicing with the Bears?
There's a lot of talented players on the Bears, so I think that just anytime that you get to see another team for a whole week and you go up against players like Kyle Long and those types of players. Not that he's the only talented player, but I mean that's probably the most talented player on the Bears roster. Even going up against another quarterback like Jay Cutler is certainly valuable, because you're going to see those players. Having Malcolm Butler go up against an Alshon Jeffrey for 3 days. I think it does avoid the dog days of summer, because otherwise this week we probably would have seen some sloppiness. That's certainly what we saw last week during these times where Not a rut, but it's just after a while training camp becomes a little bit monotonous, and to have these joint practices back-to-back weeks, I think really did help the Patriots. And it's not as if they got off to a slow start last year, but I think that this will kind of help propel them into the season a little bit.
Well, given where each team is, regardless of where each team is individually, after these past 3 days, who do you guys think grew the most or got the most out of these joint practices?
Well, for the Bears, I certainly think receiver Kevin White is a guy to keep your eye on. He's a guy who missed his entire rookie season after leg surgery and is really knocking a lot of rust off as he goes through this preseason and gets back up to speed with, game action. And so for him to have a chance to compete with the Patriots cornerbacks, Malcolm Butler at times, and see what their brand of press man coverage looks like, and to be able to match that intensity and be competitive, I think it's a big step. The Bears will tell you that the biggest hurdle for Kevin going forward is just getting experience, and the only way you get experience is to expose yourself to situations like this, to get in the games and start seeing what you really need to work on and where your flaws are. And so I think for a guy like that, a week like this is more than beneficial.
Yeah, I was really impressed with Kevin White actually this whole week. I was actually wondering if that's what he looked like throughout the summer, because he really did look like a starting caliber, possibly number one type wide receiver out there. As crazy as this sounds, I almost feel like Julian Edelman probably had the best week or the most effective week or the most valuable week out here, because he didn't practice against the Saints much. He got kind of banged up, didn't play in the preseason game, and he looked really good out there all week against the Bears cornerbacks. He kind of, broke Tracy Porter's ankles a couple times out there and just looked like his old self. So I think anytime that you're lining up against live competition, especially when it's against another team, for a guy like Edelman, who might not see much time during the preseason, I think this is extremely valuable for him.
And Dan, now coming into this preseason game after having the chance to practice with the Patriots, what do you think we will be seeing from the Bears offense that really did not look good in pre-week one?
That's an understatement. I think they were the only team in the NFL to get shut out in the preseason. Their first string offense had 13 yards on 10 plays. I'm not a math major, but that's not real good. They need to try to figure out how to establish a running game. That didn't happen against the Broncos last week, and they also have to figure out how to pick up blitzes and different pressures. And really a reshuffled offensive line from last year, a backfield that no longer has Matt Forte. You lose some of that experience and that dependability there. They really have to figure out how to get some sort of continuity going on offense. Not only didn't they score last week, they never got inside the Broncos 40 on 12 possessions. So you can imagine how the folks at Chicago sort of responded to that egg that they laid in the preseason opener last week.
Well, how much of Jay Cutler do you think we'll be seeing in this game?
Yeah, John Fox's general MO is to play his starters deep into the second quarter of the second game, give them a little bit more work than they got in week one. Then they'll get their most extensive action next week against the Chiefs. So I would say right before halftime or possibly up to halftime, depending on how the game is flowing, you'll see the Bears' first stringers in there.
All right, now as far as the Patriots quarterback situation, in case anybody missed it, Tom Brady's not going to be starting the first 4 games of the season, so we need to see more of Jimmy Garoppolo. Doug, what was your impression of his performance in that first preseason game, and what will you be looking to see tomorrow night?
I'd like to see him start off a little faster this week. He did get off to a slow start against the Saints, so he even said that this week, that the offense just has to get going a little bit faster, and I think that's kind of natural for a guy like Garoppolo, who obviously has never started an NFL game. He's only started a couple of these preseason games, so I think getting out of the gate quick, this is going to be extremely valuable in the first 4 preseason games to kind of get him situated, get him accustomed to running out of the tunnel and then having to be the quarterback, and that's obviously very new for him. So I think that, I don't think we'll see much of Brady this preseason. Maybe we'll see him a little bit in this game. Maybe we'll see him a little bit in the third or fourth game. But I think that this really will be the Jimmy Garoppolo show, because as Bill Belichick said, he's the priority. He's the guy that they have to get ready. And those first 4 games of the season are just as important as any other 4-game stretch during the season. So, I'd like to see him definitely get off to a faster start. And he was really doing well when he was hitting Malcolm Mitchell, the rookie wide receiver, last week. Mitchell won't be playing this week, so he's not going to have a full arsenal of weapons out there, and so it's going to be a little bit more challenging for him.
From a Chicago vantage point, Jimmy Garoppolo's storyline is very intriguing to folks back home as well. As a kid who went to Rolling Meadows High School, Eastern Illinois, and now all of a sudden he's thrust onto this major stage with this major Tom Brady footprint hanging over him. And so it's really interesting to see what he'll do, not only this preseason, but as you mentioned, the first 4 games. And who knows, the Bears may be looking for a quarterback before long. Jimmy may not have a home here in New England if he plays pretty well and they can't afford to keep him. So certainly something that folks in Chicago will be keeping track of.
Yeah, someone asked me the other day on Twitter, which teams might be willing to trade for Jimmy Garoppolo in the future, and the Bears were right up there for me because, Cutler, any year could be the year, I feel like, when it just all goes to hell, basically. And when that happens, then obviously they would be looking for a new quarterback.
Well, and as I mentioned, Jimmy's from Eastern Illinois. The Bears general manager, Ryan Pace, also from Eastern Illinois. I don't know, maybe the connection there.
And he grew up a Bears fan, right? Did he say
He did. He also said that he spent a lot of time watching Brett Favre, which that tells you what the Bears quarterback situation was like for a couple decades.
That was a tough stretch of quarterbacks when Jimmy was basically 0 to 18, so I can't totally blame him.
Well, guys, getting into some of the matchups we're going to see tomorrow night, I know I'm excited to see Alshon Jeffrey and Malcolm Butler after seeing those guys get pretty heated this week in practice, but who else should we be looking forward to checking out?
Well, defensively for the Bears, I think Akeem Hicks is a guy who was here a year ago for 13 games and has really breathed a lot of life into the front seven. He's playing as well as he ever has had probably the most productive camp of any Bear to date, and has really been disruptive and shown that edge that the Bears wanted to see out of him when they signed him in March on a free agent deal. I'd look for him. Another sort of under-the-radar guy on the Bears defense is Harold Jones-Corte, who's a young safety in his second year. Kind of got his feet wet a year ago, tried to figure out where he could carve out a niche on this defense. And he plays with a little bit of an edge, too. He knocked Julian Edelman on his behind during Tuesday's practice, said it was just an accident, but it was one of those sort of right-on-the-line aggressive plays that gives him a little bit of an edge. And so he's a guy that I think the Bears are looking at as a young player on the rise that can kind of breathe some of that tenacity and confidence into the defense.
I'm definitely excited to see what Akeem Hicks does out there. He'll be going up against Patriots interior offensive line, which is definitely, it's still kind of being shaken out a little bit. So he could see some time against Joe Thuney, David Andrews at center, Shaq Mason at right guard. I'm excited to see Trey Flowers go up against the Bears starting offensive line. Trey Flowers was pretty dominant in the first preseason game, but after a while there he was going up against the Saints backup. So he could even see as an interior rusher some time against Kyle Long in there, and that would be a really nice test for a young player to go up against one of the NFL's premier guards. Other than that, I'm kind of interested to see Martellus Bennett against the Bears safeties and linebackers. That's always, obviously, Bennett was with the Bears last year, so I don't know if it's going to be Jones-Corte or the linebackers in there who will be covering him. Today in practice, it looked like it was a bunch of players that were kind of going up against him there. But Bennett's looked good this summer, so I'm pretty excited to see him in every preseason game here.
Yeah, when you bring up Bennett and Hicks, there are a lot of connections between these two teams. And Dan, what do you make of Cutler and Bennett not crossing paths at all over the past 3 days?
Well, it was certainly, I would say, interesting / disappointing that Martellus didn't stand up and talk, to the Chicago media that came here. Obviously,
we were all waiting for him today, and he just walked by us.
Very colorful, very candid guy, very outspoken, but sometimes Marty only talks when it works for Marty, and sort of hid from the spotlight this week, which like I said is very disappointing given some of the shots he took at Jay, given some of the indirect shots he took at the Bears when he said he's played for 4 teams and only 2 of them have had real cohesion within the locker room. So we'll see if Martellus talks after the game Thursday night. Obviously we'll see what he does on the field as well, because the Patriots are going to have to figure out whether they can sort of take a personality as big as his and get him to blend into obviously a culture where no one personality is bigger than what they've built here.
Yeah, and I think the fact that he's only around here for 1 year on the 1-year contract, I mean that should help, but at the same time it could kind of throw a wrench in things if he's not getting the targets that he wants, if he's not, if everything's not going his way, then maybe he will speak out. But I agree, it was a little disappointing that he didn't talk this week. I would have liked to hear his thoughts on Jay Cutler and Lamar Houston and all the fights and everything, and that just didn't happen. You don't know if that's Bennett not wanting to talk, or Bill Belichick pulling him aside and saying, hey, you're not going to talk this week because we don't trust what's going to come out of your mouth at this point.
Good point.
But he should talk after the game, and it will be interesting to hear his thoughts on the week.
Certainly. Well, one guy we did hear from today, Brian Hoyer, was a little bit of a homecoming for him. What did he have to say?
Yeah, he talked about backing up Tom Brady, and that's obviously a big topic of conversation since that's what Garoppolo is doing right now, and Garoppolo's going to be the first Patriots starter not named Tom Brady since 2008. And I thought it was interesting that Hoyer said that Brady is the type of guy who's willing to help his backup quarterbacks, because I think that a lot of people are trying to create drama in New England, saying that Garoppolo and Brady don't get along, or that Brady's not going to help this guy who's trying to steal his job. And I don't really get that impression out of Brady. I think that he does try to help these guys, and maybe it's a little different when it's a guy like Brian Hoyer who went undrafted and didn't really have a chance of upseating him, whereas Garoppolo's a lot younger than Tom Brady and actually does have the chance to be the heir apparent here. But no, I mean, Hoyer's a good guy. It's kind of cool to see him catch on with the Bears, and if anything does go on with Cutler this year, perhaps it could be Hoyer who takes over this year.
Yeah, I mean, Jay hasn't started all 16 games since his first year in Chicago, which was 2009. So somewhere along the line every year there's some form of injury that pops up and the backup is needed. The Bears certainly feel like they have a reliable guy who has starting experience in Hoyer. Along with that, Brian has talked extensively through preseason about what he learned here from Tom in terms of being a backup who can be very valuable to the starter behind the scenes, taking assignments from the starter to go home and watch specific things on film each night, come back with a written report, be able to give the starter some notes and some details, and you learn a little bit more about the dynamics and sort of the standards that Tom said and some of the things that Brian carries over to what he can do for Jay even when he's not playing.
Yeah.
And be remiss not to touch on the brotherly love, of course, of Chris Long and Kyle Long. What do you think we'll be seeing from them tomorrow night?
Well, I mean, we could actually even see them match up a little bit, because Chris Long has been taking some interior pass rushing snaps, and maybe he'll even request to get some of those tomorrow just to go up against his brother. But, Chris has been good this summer. He had a couple down years there with the Rams, but he was dealing with some injuries. Now it seems like he's healthy, and he really has been one of those training camp standouts for the Patriots. He's obviously getting up there a little bit in age, but with Rob Ninkovich dealing with the torn triceps, we're probably going to see a ton of Chris Long tomorrow, and we're probably going to see him moved around a lot because the Patriots demand a lot out of versatility out of their players. So we might see him standing up, playing on the edge, playing inside, and might see him go up against Kyle, and that would be a lot of fun for everyone.
Yeah, and it's not the sibling rivalry that we all imagined. There's 4.5 years of separation between the two, so they've kind of grown up in a little different way as brothers, where Chris has always been sort of the big brother to nurture Kyle, not necessarily pick on him. And Kyle's really coming to his own. This will be his 4th year, and really by his own admission, when he was a rookie starting with the Bears, he was drowning, just confused, didn't have a lot of football knowledge. Rapid ascent from Saddleback Community College to Oregon to the Bears, and he didn't have a great feel for the game. Jay Cutler said that rookie year Kyle Long was like a caveman in terms of his knowledge, and he would just point and say, block that guy, and Kyle would do that, and that's all he really knew. Now you see his knowledge expanding, you see how good he is, and if he's not the best player on the Bears team, he's certainly in the top 2. And so the Bears understand this is a young talent, a driven guy that they can build around for years to come, and they're looking forward to seeing his progress move forward.
And now for the guys on the bubble, those first cuts, they're not coming up too quickly, but they will be here before we know it, August 30th, when the roster will be pared down to 75, and of course every snap these guys get is going to matter. Doug, starting with the Patriots, who has the most to prove in this preseason game?
That's a good question, because this Patriots roster is so deep, you can't really point to a group of players and say, okay, these are the 15 who are going to be cut in the first round of cuts. So I almost want to say anyone who's playing after that first group of starters has to prove himself. A lot of cornerbacks are vying for jobs, defensive linemen. So I think for guys like even a Geno Grissom or some of the running backs, Tyler Gaffney definitely has to have a strong preseason for the Patriots, because that's how he needs to earn a role on this roster. And he's been injured for 2 seasons now, but that is how Deion Lewis earned a role last year during the preseason. He was out of the NFL for 2 seasons, had a great preseason with the Patriots, and then became their starter. So guys like that, guys like the Tyler Gaffneys or A.J. Derby at tight end, Trey Flowers, these guys who essentially had redshirt seasons last year, I think they're among the ones with the most to prove to not only earn a spot on the roster, but potentially earn a role on this team.
having depth and too many options is certainly a good problem to have when it comes to making cuts.
What's that like?
So yeah, what's going on with the Bears now?
Yeah, obviously, Doug, as you know, these special teams phase of these preseason games becomes so important for these guys on the bubble. Two positions that sort of have the most depth for the Bears are outside linebacker and receiver. And so there's some competitions there that will be decided on special teams because they're so deep there. You look at outside linebacker, Christian Jones and Sam Acho are two guys who kind of fighting for position there. And then the Bears really have an array of options at slot receiver. Eddie Royal has missed a lot of time here in the preseason with a concussion. That's opened the door for Mark Mariani, who was here a year ago, to get some time with the starters to show what he can do. And then a 7th-round pick, Daniel Braverman, that the Bears took and really have seen a lot from him during the preseason in terms of his savvy, his ability to get open. You wonder how much they're going to kind of expose him during the preseason, because I think they've got a little diamond in the rough there. And if you let him show too much, then you don't have the luxury of stashing him on the practice squad if you want to. So those are some guys to keep an eye on as this thing gets closer to the 75-player cut down, and then obviously, as we know, getting closer to 53 for week 1.
Yeah, Braverman was really impressive, I thought, this week. He, the training camp cliche is that he's catching everything, but he was catching everything. And if he does get some time in Thursday's game, I think he'll be a great test for the Patriots' rookie cornerbacks, Trayvon LeBlanc, Jonathan Jones, D'Angelo Bentley, Darryl Roberts, who's a second-year player. All of those guys are kind of vying for one roster spot. So whoever goes up against him could have quite a test out there in the slot.
Well, much to be gained on both sides. And guys, any final thoughts on this beautiful day here at Gillette Stadium? Because it sounds like they're doing some field prep around us, so we might have to wrap this up pretty soon.
I just want to say thanks for letting me come out to New England for 4 days. This is much better than Bourbonnais, Illinois. It's been a good change of scenery, a good change of pace, and it's good to actually measure the Bears against another team.
Well, we're happy to have you.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch this preseason game because the Patriots didn't look that great during their joint practices with the Saints, and they kind of came out and beat them up a little bit. So I'm not sure if that's going to happen again on Thursday night, but this will be a good test. It'll be a good chance to see where both these teams are at, really.
All right, well, everyone stay tuned on Nesson.com and also head over to the Chicago Tribune. I am your host of the Nesson Pro Football Podcast. Again, looking for any name ideas. Make sure to give me a follow on Twitter, maybe. I'm at Michaela Nesson. Doug Kyde is, of course, at Doug Kyde. And Dan, you are at Dan Wiederer?
That's correct.
Spell it for him.
Wiederer, common spelling of Wiederer.
So there you common. There you go. For all your Bears news, make sure to throw him a follow. You guys, thanks so much, and stay tuned for the next podcast.